about Samori Toure, and it is a celebration of the courage, you know, of human beings to resist tyranny and colonialism, and to determine their own future. And that's what I wanted to capture, and to also celebrate mother-son relationship, which I have the fortune of having, this special relationship with my mother, the same kind of relationship that somebody had with his mother.
Thank you for joining us today. We are joined by Mr. Vamba Sheriff. He's an author, he's a scholar, he's a Liberian national, as well as he's based in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. And we are honored today to have him on our podcast. We're going to be discussing his journey, how he became a writer, his story, and how his Liberian heritage has influenced his writing. So, do welcome Mr. Vamba Sheriff to the Unpopular Opinion podcast. Mr. Vamba Sheriff, you are welcome to the Unpopular Opinion podcast, and it is an honor for us to have you today on this platform. And we're looking forward to having an interactive discussion with you. I believe that the audience would like to know who is Mr. Vamba Sheriff, what influenced your journey to become an active writer or storyteller, and how has your Liberian heritage influenced work that you're doing now as a professional writer?
Thank you so much, nephew. It's an honor to be in conversation with you because we have a common history. We both being Sherifs or Haidara, like they call us in West Africa. My name is Vamba Sheriff. I was born in northern Liberia in Lofa County, precisely in Kolahun. But my parents came from Bakedu. My mother, Mabindu or Bindu Sherif, and my father, Wata Amara Sherif. My mother, Mabindu Sherif, was the eldest daughter of my namesake, the great Islamic scholar, Vamba Sheriff, Kamo Vamba Sheriff. So he was well known throughout Liberia and beyond, in Sierra Leone and Guinea, a great, great scholar. His deeds, his work, but especially his deeds, as a very benevolent and a very giving human being, reached me. I grew up hearing from my grandmother, hearing stories of his good deeds. That this was a man who always gave to the world, gave back. He was always, everything he earned, he gave away. My mother told me these stories, and grandmother told me these stories. And his life story inspired me, his love of knowledge. I think I am today who I am partly because of those stories, those wonderful stories that my grandmother and my mother and other family members told me. And I come from a family of scholarship. I can trace my origin centuries back to people who were great scholars, to people who honored and respected knowledge and who transmitted that knowledge to people. My father and my mother were actually Sherifs. They were Sherifs on both sides. On both sides, there is, I don't know whether I can say that here, but there is something that relates to Ali ibn Talib, that is the nephew of the Prophet Muhammad. His son Hassan Hussein, I think it was Hussein, who said, Ana ibn Khairatain, yeah, I'm a child of two goods, so, um, you know, of two blessings, you could say, so I am that child. And so this kind of very special history brings with it some responsibility. You have to do something special in this world. It's a burden, but it's also a blessing, and in my case, that blessing manifested itself in my writings. Early on, as a child, going to madrasa and that's the Kolahon Muslim Association School, where we learned Arabic and English. I already love stories and I loved writing. I discovered, because I did not really experience my father. I was very young when he passed on, but I discovered that he had this beautiful handwriting. So I wanted to have as beautiful a handwriting as my as my father. And so that's where my fascination for writing, for the written word started. So I was writing stories in as a child already. And when we moved to Kuwait, through the efforts of my brother Vamba Sheriff, who went to Cairo to study in Cairo, when we moved to Kuwait, I expanded that passion for writing, for reading. And yes, so I used to write letters, long letters home. I used to write some long letters, sometimes 20, 30 pages, telling about life in Kuwait, describing the desert, the heat. So that's where my passion for writing began. And what made me the writer I am today is the Liberian Civil War, because when the war broke out in 1989, Christmas 1989, we were in Kuwait, and we thought it was going to be over in a few months, but the war did not end. In fact, it's engulfed the entire country in a matter of few months, and so we were left stranded in Kuwait. And um, in August of 1990, war broke out in Kuwait, and this war actually brought an end to our lives in Kuwait and forced us to flee that country and to seek asylum elsewhere. So we went to Syria first, a few years there, and from Syria we came to the Netherlands. And it's because of that displacement, it's because of that reality of being of not of a country embroiled in war. Liberia was at war at that time, and Kuwait, where we live, was also at war. I reached out deep in myself to try to explain the world to myself, to try to explain Liberia to myself. I wanted to know and understand what was happening in Liberia. I wanted to know why a country that was so unique in Africa, the first African republic, founded uh, in early 19th century, 1822, why such a country was, waging war on itself. So I wanted to understand that. I wanted to understand the war, and I wanted to formulate my hatred of war, to create an alternative story, the Liberia that I hope existed, the Liberia, a hopeful Liberia. That's what I wanted to paint, and in my novel, Land of My Fathers. So these are the factors and mechanisms that made me who the writer I am today. My family background, a family of great Islamic scholars who revered the written word and who spread Islam in West Africa, to my experience of war in my country that decimated populations. A lot of people died in that war, and a war in the country where I was living, Kuwait. So,
Thank you very much, Mr. Bamba Sheriff. There are a lot of similarities between you and myself. I mean, from the things you've explained,
mm,
coming to a family background, I am also a sheriff from both sides, both from my mother and my father. We both are sheriffs. So I think that's a similarity. But the only difference between us right now is you are from Lofa and I am from Grangeda County. So
yes,
that'll
yeah.
be the biggest difference between us. And you talk about the stories that inspired you to become a writer that you are today. You talk about the story of your grandfather, the story of your father, and the way you envisage Liberia, a first African countries to have to be independent, sub country that was very peaceful, that many countries citizens of other countries used to move to for peace and seeking refuge, and now finding themselves in the state of agony and killing themselves as a result of political situation. And I want us to go into your writings. In the novel, you talked about the son of emperor.
Mm-hmm.
I want us to talk about that. What actually inspired that story, and what message do you really wanted to portray for people to understand from your writing?
Yes, thank you so much. Uh, the Emperor's Son is my most ambitious novel. I spent 6 years writing that novel. It's the most personal book to me. And it's inspired by a true story. It is inspired by the life and times of the great emperor of the Wassoulou, Samori Toure. In Kolahu, I grew up I mean, no people from my people, the Mandingoes, and other people of West Africa, who did not know, who did not grow up hearing the exploits of Samori Toure, his conquests, his sofas, his horsemen. I mean, those are legendary stories told. One of my teachers from Kenya, Ustaz Mahmoud, he loved this Guinean singer, Dimba Kamara. Dimba, with the golden voice, one of the most, I mean, greatest, most beautiful gifts Africa has given to the world. I mean, a short-lived life, but a great legacy. So my teacher, Ustaz Mahmoud, had the habit of playing Dimba's songs. And one of the most beautiful songs that he loved, of all the songs that he used to play, um, was the song about Samori, and Dimba sang the song in two parts, part one and part two. And that song has everything. It's a long chant to the glory, to the past glory of Samori's empire. It is beautiful, it is heart-rending, and it shows you the legacy of colonialism, but also the courage of the man who rose against the French and later the English to preserve his empire, against all odds. And in some cases, he won. So those stories I grew up hearing, and they were told in the superlatives. Some of these stories everywhere in West Africa is told in the superlatives. So uh, I was, uh, when you're a writer, you try to capture important events in your life, and I had always dreamed of capturing summary. I wanted to write about somebody from the very beginning. My first book, actually, about Liberia, there is a scene in that novel. You see, because they say first novels are always, the seed in which the writer explore all the themes that will define his writing later in later years. So in Land of My Fathers, there is a scene in which Samori Toure sends a delegation to Monrovia, to the Liberian president of the 19th century at that time, seeking his help. This is actually a historical fact. Somebody reached out to the Liberian government of that time, asking them to supply him with weapons so that he could fight the French. So I was already thinking about writing about somebody with my first book when I was in my 20s. So you see how my fascination for somebody today. But I decided to act on it because it's one thing to dream about doing something, but it's quite another to say, all right, I'm going to do it now. It happened when I read an interview that was given by the great father of the African cinema, the Senegalese Ousmane Sembène, or Sembène Ousmane. Yes. No, Ousmane Sembène. And Ousmane Sembène, in that interview, he said he had been trying to make a film about Samori Toure for more than 40 years. Sembène did not succeed in making that film was for me the incentive to try my best to write a book about Samori Toure. So Sembeni, you should remember, was born in Casamance. In Casamance, that part of Senegal, there are many Mandingo people live. So he grew up. He could even speak Mandingo. So he was not a Mande. He was a Wolof, but he grew up with the Mandingos, and they were the one who told him about Samori. And in Samori, he recognized himself as a very rebellious person, very high-headed, very, he didn't like authority at all. He hated this the colonial authority. He hated the colonizers, so he wanted to do everything, to rebel against them. So when he heard about somebody, he was like, oh yeah, this man could have been, could have become my brother, So he wanted to emulate him, and he became fascinated by him and dreamed of making this movie. But he died without realizing that dream. 40 years of his life trying to make a film about Samori Toure. So I decided to travel through West Africa. I traveled in many countries, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, Mali, Senegal. I went as far as Timbuktu collecting stories about Samori, meeting people and talking to them. But the Emperor's Son is not only the story of Samori Toure. The Emperor's Son is also the story of the Sherifs. If you remember, there is a legend that about the Sherifs. This one Sherif who left Timbuktu and then moved southwards and settled in Misado, and married there. There is this legend that exists, about how the Sherifs ended up in Konia. So I wanted to know this story. I wanted to confirm this story. So I went to Konia. I went to Bela. I went to Jakodu. I went to where's this place? Kiwani. I went to Misadu, all this place. Misadu, I stayed there for 2 weeks. So collecting stories, about not only my family, but how Konya came about as a place. Yes, all these migrations and things, So these are the two stories that form the Emperor's Son. And so this is what I wanted to explore in this novel, to explore the rich heritage of the Sharifs, as a people, as a house of knowledge. That's what it is. Everywhere you go in West Africa, the Haidaras are the people of knowledge, and that's what I wanted to portray in this novel, people who revered scholarship and also to explain Samori Toure's life, to tell Samori Toure's life story. There is the story that the connection that I needed to be able to write this book was I found when I was researching the novel. I discovered that Samori had a very, very good relationship with the Sharifs, especially the Sharifs of Kanka. And actually he gave his one of his daughters to Sekubas, the great Sekubas, whose picture you can see behind me on the left. So is it so? I don't know. Yes. So yeah, yeah. So that's Sekubas picture. so he Sekuba's father, Kamo Sidiki, was married to one of Samari's daughters. So that's the link I was looking for. I said, so there is this connection between the two people. The emperor, this great emperor, and my family. So that's what I try to explore in the Emperor's Son.
This video is proudly sponsored by Magnite Clothing Brand. If you are living in Europe or in any part of the world and you need an African clothing, you can simply check them up on their Instagram page. The link is in the description of this video. It's quite fascinating. I mean, things that you try to link together. I mean, go dating back over hundreds of years, getting the historical facts to portray what's actually happening today, and at least some sort of education for the sheriffs, and letting us know who we are
Mm.
and what we need to do. And I want to also go into I want to ask you about something. How do you balance the historical accuracy in your writing?
Mm.
And especially in terms of when you are telling the story, how do
Mm.
you ensure that what is being said is actually truth? And how are you able to like compare various evidence to show that whatever that's been said in your book or what you've during your research period or data collection process, how do you ensure that all of those information, various components, are facts and you can rely upon them to be able to explain your story?
Yes, that was the most challenging aspect of writing a novel. The amount of information that was out there, it was so much, so overwhelming. Because everywhere you go, for example, when you're writing about somebody, people tell you their own version of somebody today. And some places he is a villain, some places he is a hero. And even my family history, the Sherifs, there are different versions of the story. Um, some facts you can collaborate, and some facts you cannot. But I am first and foremost a novelist. I'm not a historian. And novelists, there is a beautiful saying by a German writer and philosopher. He said, novels arise out of the shortcomings of history. There are some aspects of summary that were not highlighted by historians and that fascinated me. So I decided that those were shortcomings of history and I had to correct that. And that fascinating aspect of summary, for example, is the fact that the mother, the Mandingoes just tend to, to own everything, to own the pride that this is somebody, it is theirs and theirs alone. But there is another aspect to somebody that many people don't talk about, and that's the fact that his mother claimed her past, her roots in the people of Liberia, in the forest people of Liberia. She was not originally a Mandingo person, So I wanted to celebrate that by celebrating that diversity, that complex character of Samori, complex heritage. I wanted to celebrate that. I wanted to say that Samori is not only does not he does not belong only to the Mandingos, but to many other people of West Africa. You know, and that bond between mother and child, I wanted to celebrate in this novel. So um, without really saying, "Oh, everything that in this book is true." No, that was not my intention. No, that was not my goal. It is impossible to write, even for historians, to write a story that in which everything is said about a particular event or people is true. What you try to do is to be honest in your portrayal of what you're writing about, to try to be honest about the times and the intentions, you know, because if a mother is so important in African culture, deep down within somebody, or perhaps because perhaps he did not really talk about it, or perhaps he openly talk about it, the most important person in his life must have been his mother, because I experienced that, you experienced that, you know, black people and their mother, so I wanted to celebrate that. That's actually, this is where the title of the novel came from, The Emperor's Son. This is a boy who comes from the forest, what is now Liberia, and enters somebody's life, so somebody sees him and recognizes his mother in the boy. This is the connection. I wanted to connect the forest with the savannah, and celebrate that unity, because I mean, when our people moved and migrated and settled elsewhere, there were intermarriages all over the place. So I wanted to celebrate that. Actually, this is what I wanted to celebrate, and not to write a book in which everything is said and written about is true. No, that was not my goal. No, but the spirit of what I wanted to capture, somebody being this resistant leader, is true. Somebody celebrating his mother. Actually, we all know this is a fact. Many people who have read or heard Samori stories know that it was because of the capture of his mother that Samori eventually became who he was. This is what I wanted to celebrate.
I'll encourage everybody to please support my channel. If you want to see better guests coming on this platform every week, if you want to see us in better studio, if you want to see us having better show, if you want to see this podcast moving very far, I want you to please support my channel by liking, commenting, sharing, encouraging your family members and friends to support and subscribe to this channel. All right, thank you very much. Love for mother makes a child to do anything, especially in the African context. I want to ask you, what role do you think literature or writing plays in reshaping the future of Africa? And what are some of the challenges that you think African writers face? And are they writing gaining global recognition, or are they getting support globally for their writings?
Mhm. I think writing plays a role, a very, very important role in shaping the future of a country, or a continent, for that matter. It's where writers who give shape and emotions to what Africans were going through under colonialism. Books like Things Fall Apart. Those are books that told about what we as a people, Africans, were experiencing under colonialism. Gungi Watingo's Weep Not Child, The River Between. Those books were books that were talking about what we were going through. Those so literature is very, 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 very important. The entire history of what Western civilization, the fact that some people say look towards the West is because of the books that we're writing, that show the Western perspective, and that we read, or people who were colonized read and began to look, you know, to look with special veneration to the West. That's the media that we're using. That's the literature, you know, and it's still been going on in different medium now, in a different media, in television and whatever, you know. So it is very, 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 very important, and this is why I mean, a country's really, really future largely depends also in celebrating their authors, because those are the people who give direction to where the country must go, because I mean, when you paint a picture, a full picture of the society as a writer, you can only do that when you're a novelist or a writer, you know. So we owe a lot to the contribution of of writers in how we perceive ourselves. Because if we, I mean, we are made of stories. I think it's Sambin Husman who said that. It is stories that make us as human beings. Without stories, we are nothing, you know. So, and we tell stories in different forms. We tell it through literature. Literature is the most effective, and cinema, the most effective form of storytelling. When we didn't have books, we didn't have cinema, we had the Gillies, the griots who were telling us, preserving our histories for us. You know, it is through the efforts of the Gili that we know Soliata Keita, you know, eh? And I was reading a different version of the Soliata epic. It's a Gambian version. I've discovered that the word Sondiata is actually it consists of two words, son and yata. Son in a Monday, as you know, is the thief, and yata is someone who takes. So I was like, what? I never thought of that name that way. So uh, you see how the efforts of the Jalis, through their efforts, we came to know exactly who Sundiata Keita, the Lion King, was. And so literature is so very, very, very important, really. And that the fact that in many countries in Africa, people are not paying a lot of attention to literature is a sad, sad development, really, because it is so very important to us. We are stories. We are stories. And regarding the attention, yes, African writers are celebrated globally. I think much, much more than in Africa itself. I mean, I've been invited all over the world. My books have been published in many languages, in German, French, Spanish, Polish, even in many other languages, even in one of the Indian languages in India. I've been there to launch my book. So yes, I think it's time for many countries that are not celebrating literature to do so. Nigeria is doing its best. Ghana also. Some countries are doing their best, but much more can be done. We need publishing houses. We need to encourage many writers to to write, because there's so many stories out there. Oh my God. All the stories be written. So many, many, many stories. The stories that I heard as a child, the stories. I mean, I think I'll keep writing them until my last day. So yes, so many stories out there. We need to celebrate our writers.
To our audience that are listening to us, if you are just joining us, I want you to please subscribe to this YouTube channel. I want you to please like, share, comment, as well as you can put your recommendation to us about individuals that are doing remarkable works in their various countries in the area of education, in politics, in entrepreneurship. We would try our best to bring them to this platform to discuss the critical works that they are doing in their various countries. And this video is probably sponsored by Mike Knight Clothing Brand. If you are living in Europe or in any part of the world and you need an African clothing, you can simply check them up on their Instagram page. The link is in the description of this video. Mr. Sherif, thank you very much. We are almost coming to an end of the show. I want to ask you, what legacy do you hope to achieve? And
Mm,
also, what advice can you give to other African writers, young writers, or people aspiring to become writers?
My hope is to inspire many Liberians, specifically, but Africans in general, to become better writers, to write better books, to read as much as they can because of this age. I mean, the access to books is easier than before. I hope they can be inspired by what I write or what I say to write, um, you know, better books, and yes, to become great writers. And I also hope to be inspired by what I do, by, you know, inspired. I am myself inspired by the deeds of my grandfather and some wonderful people I've met, some family members who have shown their humanity to me, who have revealed their uniqueness. And I hope that people are inspired by some of the things that I do. Yes. So the book is here. I wanted to show it, So the Emperor's Son is just published this year, and about Samori Toure. And it is a celebration of the courage, of human beings to resist tyranny and colonialism, and to determine their own future. And that's what I wanted to capture, and to also celebrate mother-son relationship, which I had the fortune of having, this special relationship with my mother, the same kind of relationship that somebody had with his mother. I wanted to celebrate that. So I hope that, yes, that this generation and next can really, really dedicate themselves to literature and do everything, to give voice to the voiceless, to sing the African future, the African past, present, and future.
I'll encourage everybody to please support my channel. If you want to see better guests coming on this platform every week, if you want to see us in better studio, if you want to see us having better show, if you want to see this podcast moving very far, I want you to please support my channel by liking, commenting, sharing, encouraging your family members and friends to support and subscribe to this channel. Mr. Sheriff, I want to ask you about the land of my father. You tell us the background story about that book
Yeah.
and what message you also intend to portray in that story.
So, Land of My Fathers was inspired by my love for Liberia. It is a story of friendship between two men. A man whom we call Congo in Liberia. So those are people who returned from the U.S. The Congo people, we say. A Congo man, Edward Richards, who was born in slavery, and who grew up as an enslaved person in the U.S. and at a certain point gained his freedom and decided to go to Liberia to reunite with his beloved. So while he was in Liberia, he met this remarkable man, and the story of this man is actually a very popular story in Lofa. This man was called Halingi or Hale. Among the Bandis and also the Lomas and even the Gisis, there's this story of this man who hated war so much. There was a threat of war in that region of what is now Liberia, in northern Liberia. And the oracles, in those days, there were no Islam or Christianity. The oracle ordained that to avert, to stop the war from entering that part of the war and decimating the people and destroying everything, someone had to come forward to sacrifice himself to avert that war. And according to legends, among all these three people, the Lamas, the Gisi, and the Bandis, there was a man who came forward to do that, who gave himself, who died voluntarily to stop that war. So, Land of My Fathers is the friendship between these two people. So you see what I'm trying to achieve here. I'm trying to achieve, this hopefully the friendship between two people who were, considered enemies in Liberia because of war, because of all this, the history of Liberia, all these things that happened. I wanted to, to offer an alternative, a friendship between two people who were different, because Edward Richards was actually a pastor, or someone who was a Christian, who believed, who had nothing to do with these African traditions and everything, but who, when he met this man, recognized him as a very special person and became friends with him. So it's a novel, because you should remember, when I'm writing this, while I was writing this novel, Liberia was at war. Everything was going wrong. So I wanted to offer a different story of what we could be, of what we were, or we hope to be. So this is why I wrote this book. The Halingi legend lives. Not many stories have been written about it, but it does. It is very funny that the Halingi story, while I was researching it, I discovered that it was connected to the Misalu epic. It's so strange, you know. So and then you see this Mandingo aspect to it, so you see that how when you go back further and further, we see that we are all connected and that we are all, our histories and origin are all the same. So this is what I wanted to celebrate.
Like you said, one of my teachers, and he's my mentor as well, he said that whenever you go back in history, you always identify yourself in other people.
Yes.
He always say that to me. So he said we are all connected. We don't know until we go back in time. I think we are almost to an end of the show. Uh, I want to ask you one question. If you were to if you were to have a conversation with a historian
Mm.
to who inspire your writing, who would that be and why?
Oh my God. Yes, someone in history with whom I would like to have a conversation. That is a very difficult question because there are so many people who inspire me. Um, I would have loved to meet my grandfather, the man after whom I was named. A historical figure, a very famous historical figure. God, maybe as a writer, a Colombian writer, Marquez. Uh, his his celebration of magic realism are things that happen around us, and nobody in Africa, for example, and none of us really consider it as very unique. All these things that are happening. How he just look at life the way it is. I would have loved to talk to him about that. So Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and also my grandfather. I would have loved to hear his voice because people tell stories of how great a scholar he was. I would have loved to sit with him for like hours and just hear, his voice and his stories.
Okay. Thank you very much. We encourage all the audience to please check out The Emperor's Son. It's already on sale. You can check on the internet now. You can get a copy. It's an interesting book. I've read summary of it, and I'm looking forward to also get a copy of mine. So I encourage everybody to please get a copy of the book. But before we take a leave of Mr. Sherif, I want to encourage all of you to please support this channel by liking, commenting, sharing, recommending individuals to us that are doing remarkable works in their various countries in youth development, in education, entrepreneurship, in politics. We will try our best to bring them to this platform to discuss the critical roles that they are playing in their various countries, which is leading to development across the African continent. This video today is proudly sponsored by McKnight Clothing Brand. If you need African clothing, you can simply check them up on their Instagram page. The link is in the description of this video. Mr. Sherif, before we take a leave of you, can you please give us your final words or advice that you like to give to other writers or young people across that are listening to us in this today's segment?
Yes, thank you so much, my brother. My advice to young writers is to be honest in your writing. When I say honest, I don't mean honest by insulting people. Honest, no. What I mean is to do your very best. To give it your all, not to be easily satisfied with what you're writing. After the first draft, you say, "Oh, I'm creating a masterpiece or something." No, you should do. You should review it and write and rewrite and until you have this feeling that I can give it I've given it my all. So yes, and to be good, to be very good, and to be caring and good. That's my advice.
Sorry,
Yes.
before we take a leave of you,
Yes.
do you have any other project that you are currently working on, or Person is the final project that?
No, 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 no. A writer is always writing. I'm writing a novel inspired by my friendship with my childhood friend. So it's a novel about friends, friendship. Yes, that's what I'm writing.
Before we take a leave of you, we want to say thank you very much for being here today on Unpopular Opinion. It is an honor for us to have you, and we're looking forward to having more conversation with you as you continue to inspire many people through your writing, your creative storytelling styles. We are honored to have you, and until we meet again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, Mr. Sharif.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, my brother.